The Galactic Council hall was filled with noise and light. Thousands of alien species sat in their shining seats, their eyes glowing in colors never seen on Earth. They had gathered to make one decision: the fate of humanity. At the center of the great hall stood a single human, Ambassador Daniel Hayes, dressed in the blue uniform of the United Earth Alliance. He looked small compared to the tall, glowing figures around him, but his eyes carried a strength that made even the boldest alien look twice. The Supreme Chancellor of the Council, a tall insectoid being with crystal wings, raised his voice. "Humanity has grown too fast," he said coldly. "You break our laws. You build weapons beyond your right. You refuse to obey the order of the galaxy." The echo of his words filled the hall like thunder. Hayes stayed silent for a moment, feeling every gaze burning into him. Then he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Earth is free," he said. "We don't belong to your council, and we don't kneel to anyone." The hall erupted in chaos. Some shouted in anger, others in disbelief. One alien leader, covered in silver scales, hissed, "You dare defy the council? You are nothing compared to us." Hayes did not flinch. He looked at them, one by one, and said, "You think strength is control, but real strength is choice." The silence that followed was heavy. No one had ever spoken to the council that way. The Chancellor rose from his throne, wings trembling with fury. "Then humanity will be erased from the stars," he declared, his voice filled with rage. The chamber lights turned red as the order spread through the council's network. Across hundreds of star systems, fleets began to move. Humanity had just been sentenced to extinction. Hayes left the hall slowly, his footsteps echoing on the crystal floor. He knew what was coming. As he boarded his small ship back to Earth, he looked out at the shining spiral arms of the galaxy. They looked beautiful, calm, and endless. But he knew soon they would burn. He whispered quietly to himself, "They think they can erase us, but they have no idea what we become when we're cornered." Back on Earth, the message from the Council arrived. The leaders of every nation gathered in the underground command room of the United Earth Defense Network. Screens showed alien fleets gathering near Mars, hundreds of ships forming like a storm. Fear spread across the room, but no one spoke. Then General Reed stood up and said, "If this is the end, we face it standing." No one disagreed. Orders were given, shields raised, fleets prepared, but deep down everyone knew the truth. They could not win this war, not yet. Hours later, the first attack began, from the night sky above Mars' colony. 1,000 alien warships appeared. Flames filled the blackness as the first human colony fell. Millions screamed as the planet turned to dust. Earth's satellites showed the destruction live. Cities fell silent, hearts broke, but something else grew. A quiet, burning anger. Humanity was not made to bow. They would not beg. They would survive. No matter the cost. As the last transmission from Mars ended, Ambassador Hayes spoke again to the leaders, his face tired, his voice steady. "They wanted war," he said. "Now we give them something they'll never forget." And in that single moment, a new kind of silence filled the room. Not fear, but resolve. The kind that changes history forever. The war had started, and there was no going back. The Galactic Council's fleets moved like storms across the stars, burning everything that carried a human name. They called it the Cleansing, a campaign to remove humanity from the galaxy forever. To them, Earth was nothing more than a dangerous infection that needed to be erased, but to the people of Earth, it was the beginning of something much greater. The first human colonies fell quickly. Mars Colony 6 was gone, Europa Station was destroyed, and the outposts on Titan and Callisto were silent. Families were scattered, soldiers lost contact, and the human fleet was too small to stop the attacks. Every day, the Council broadcasted their victories to the galaxy, showing burning cities and shattered ships. They wanted everyone to see what happens when someone refuses to bow. On Earth, fear filled every heart. Cities prepared for evacuation, bunkers were filled, and military ships waited in orbit. But there was one thing the aliens did not understand. Humans never stop fighting. Even when they lose everything, they always find a way to stand again. In a secret meeting under the frozen mountains of Antarctica, a group of leaders, scientists, and soldiers gathered. They called themselves the Last Command, and their mission was simple: survive, rebuild, and strike back. At the center of the room stood General Reed and Ambassador Hayes. Reed looked tired, his uniform torn and burned, but his eyes were still sharp. "The Council thinks we're finished," he said. "Let them believe it. That will be our advantage." Hayes nodded. "They've seen our fleets, our weapons, but not our will." The group agreed to disappear from the galaxy's eyes. They would go silent, vanish completely, and begin what they called Project Horizon. Its purpose was hidden, its goal unspoken, but everyone in that room knew what it meant. Humanity would rise again. As months passed, the alien fleets searched for survivors, but there was nothing left to find. Human communication channels went dark, their signals vanished, and their colonies became cold graves. The Council believed it was over. They celebrated. Declaring victory, the Supreme Chancellor gave a grand speech, saying, "The human race has been erased from the stars." The hall roared in triumph, but far from the noise and celebration, deep in the shadow of a dead star, humanity was not gone. Underground bases hummed with quiet energy. Old ships were repaired, new designs were tested, and human engineers worked day and night. The smartest minds on Earth and the colonies joined together to create weapons the galaxy had never seen. They studied alien technology, learned their weaknesses, and improved every system. In hidden bunkers on the moon, children trained beside soldiers, learning to survive in silence. Earth had become a world of ghosts, but ghosts that remembered everything. Hayes recorded a message for every human who survived. It was sent across encrypted channels, reaching those hiding on distant moons and asteroids. His voice was calm but filled with fire. "They think we are gone," he said. "Let them believe it, because when we return, they will remember our name forever." The message became a promise, passed from one survivor to another. Even the smallest child could repeat it. It was the heartbeat of a dying species that refused to die. Years passed, and the galaxy grew quiet again. Trade returned. The Council rebuilt its armies, and new generations forgot the war. But deep in the darkness beyond known space, something moved. Strange signals began to appear. Human codes, faint and broken, but real. The Council ignored them at first, calling them ghosts. But the ghosts were watching, waiting, and building. Humanity was not finished. The fall was only the beginning. Years passed after the Great Fall. The galaxy moved on, or at least, it pretended to. The Galactic Council rebuilt their fleets, restored their cities, and erased the memory of humanity from their records. To them, humans were nothing more than a dark chapter now closed. But in the silent corners of deep space, something strange began to stir. It started with whispers among traders and miners. Ships that entered certain regions of space simply vanished. Patrols sent to investigate never returned. Some said it was pirates. Others blamed rogue planets. But those who saw the truth spoke of shadows that moved faster than light, of human voices echoing through the static of old communication channels. No one believed them. Until one day, a Council scout ship picked up a distress signal using an ancient Earth frequency. The crew followed it to a dying star system. They found no planet, No station, only the remains of their own ships floating silently in orbit. Then, the signal stopped. Rumors spread across the outer colonies. People began calling it the Ghost Network. Old human codes appearing and disappearing like fading memories. But what the Council didn't know was that humanity had not only survived, they had changed. Hidden deep inside the dark space beyond known charts, humans had built something new, a world made of steel and silence. They called it the Bastion, a fortress hidden within the core of a dying star, invisible to all sensors, untouchable by any fleet. Inside the Bastion, life was hard, but filled with purpose. Children were born and raised under artificial skies, taught that survival was not enough. They had to reclaim what was lost. Scientists worked endlessly, designing ships that could vanish from sight, engines that made no sound, and weapons that could pierce any shield. Every invention came from pain, every idea from loss. Humanity had turned its suffering into its greatest strength. Admiral Kane, one of the few survivors from the old Earth fleet, commanded the Bastion now. He had seen the destruction of Mars with his own eyes. He had promised himself that one day the galaxy would see humanity again, not as victims, but as legends. Meanwhile, in the council halls, unease began to grow. Reports of missing ships became more frequent. Trade convoys disappeared without warning, leaving behind only silence. Council commanders debated in fear. One of them, a reptilian named Varesh, slammed his clawed hand on the table and shouted, "It's them! The humans! They're still out there!" The Chancellor dismissed him with a laugh. "Ghosts do not build fleets. Admiral?" But even he felt something cold in his chest when the lights flickered for a moment and the screen behind him flashed with a single human word. Remember, back in the Bastion, Admiral Kane watched from his command deck as the human fleet came alive for the first time. Rows of black ships, sleek and silent, floated above the metal world, their engines burning faint blue in the dark. He stood before his crew and said, "The galaxy thinks we're gone. But history is written by the ones who return." Cheers filled the deck. But there was no joy, only determination. Every man and woman there had lost someone, and they carried that pain like armor. In the following months, human scouts began to move again. They entered alien space quietly, gathering data, studying targets, watching patterns. No one noticed them. No one suspected. The humans had become ghosts. Patient and unseen, they waited for the right moment, not for revenge, but for justice. And when that moment came, the galaxy would finally remember the species it tried to erase. The vanishing years had ended. The awakening had begun. The galaxy slept peacefully. Believing the humans were long gone, trade routes were busy again, and the Galactic Council was stronger than ever. The war with Earth had become an old story told to scare young cadets. But deep in the black silence beyond known space, humanity was waiting. They had watched, they had studied, and now they were ready. The first counterstrike began without warning. It started on the planet Rothan Prime, a wealthy council world known for its grand cities and shining towers. At exactly midnight, every satellite above the planet went dark. Moments later, the skies split open from the void. Invisible shapes appeared. Sleek human ships cloaked in shadows. No one saw them coming, no one heard them arrive. Only a voice filled every communication channel. Calm and cold. For every world you burned, 100 will rise in fire. Before the council could respond, beams of silent light tore through their defense grids. Massive explosions lit the night as the first human counterattack began. The alien command center tried to send a distress call, but their signals were jammed. Every system failed. One after another, within minutes, Rothan Prime, one of the most powerful worlds in the galaxy, was reduced to silence. The council was in shock. For the first time in decades, they felt fear. At an emergency meeting, Admiral Varesh stood trembling, his scales dull under the lights. "I told you," he hissed. "They're back. The humans have returned." The Chancellor refused to believe it. Impossible. No one survives a cleansing. But as he spoke, another alarm sounded. Reports came from multiple sectors. Entire fleets missing. Outposts destroyed. No survivors. The words, "human interference suspected," appeared on every screen. Back in the Bastion, Admiral Kane watched the reports come in with silent satisfaction. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He only said, "Let them feel what we felt." Around him, officers moved quickly, their faces serious, their eyes burning with purpose. They weren't fighting for revenge. They were fighting to remind the galaxy that humanity still existed. Every ship carried the same message carved into its hull. We remember. Days turned into weeks. And the attacks continued. Human ships appeared out of nowhere, striking key supply lines and disappearing before anyone could react. Alien fleets tried to fight back, but their weapons were useless against the new human technology. Stealth systems made their enemies blind, and gravity torpedoes tore their ships apart in silence. Some said the humans had become demons of the dark. Others whispered that they had found power beyond science. Whatever the truth was, the fear spread faster than any fleet could move. In the deep halls of the Council, panic grew. Planets demanded protection, colonies declared independence, and the unity of the galaxy began to crack. The Chancellor called for calm, but his words meant nothing now. No one could stop the ghost fleet that haunted the stars. Every night when the lights flickered in the cities of alien worlds, people looked to the sky in fear. They feared the moment the humans would come for them. Meanwhile, Kane stood in front of his crew aboard the flagship Eclipse Dawn. He looked at the stars and spoke softly. "This isn't the end," he said. "This is only the first step. We don't destroy for power. We destroy for memory." The crew saluted in silence. The human fleet moved again, engines glowing faint blue as they vanished into the void. They left no trace, no sign. Only a whisper carried across the stars. A whisper that said, "We are still here. The first counterstrike had begun." And the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy was no longer at peace. Fear spread through the stars like a silent storm. The once proud Galactic Council had lost control. Their fleets moved without direction. Their leaders spoke without confidence. Every world whispered the same name: humans. No one knew where they came from or how they attacked. Ships would vanish in the middle of hyperspace. Stations would explode without warning. No messages, no survivors, only silence. Alien commanders called it the War of Shadows, a war that was never declared, yet one that consumed entire star systems. In a secret council meeting, Admiral Varesh slammed his claws on the table. "Every day we lose another fleet," he shouted. "They strike and disappear like ghosts." The Supreme Chancellor's wings trembled as he replied, "We must find their base, somewhere they hide, somewhere they build," but no one could find it. Even the most advanced scanners couldn't detect the Bastion. It was hidden within the magnetic heart of a dying star, a fortress of light and steel surrounded by storms no ship could survive. Inside the Bastion, the humans continued to prepare. Their technology was far beyond what the galaxy remembered. Every ship was faster, every weapon smarter, and every pilot trained for one goal: to never be seen. Admiral Kane stood at the command deck, staring at a hologram of the galaxy. Red marks showed the systems that once attacked Earth. One by one, those red marks were turning black. Kane spoke quietly. "We're not fighting to destroy. We're fighting to balance the scales." Beside him, Commander Lyra, one of the youngest human captains, nodded and said, "But they'll never understand that." "To them, we're monsters." Kane looked at her and replied, "Then let them fear monsters." Across the galaxy, panic turned to paranoia. Planets began blaming each other. Some races even left the Council. Fearing human retaliation, old alliances fell apart. The Council's power was fading faster than anyone expected. Yet still they tried to fight. A fleet of 500 ships was sent to trap the humans in the Atheon sector. But when they arrived, they found only empty space. Moments later, their ships started exploding one by one. As invisible mines tore them apart, in just 2 hours, the fleet was gone. The only signal left behind was a single human phrase repeated in a loop: Justice, not revenge. Back in the Bastion, the mood was quiet. Humans didn't celebrate their victories. They remembered their losses. Every destroyed alien fleet was a reminder of the billions of humans who once burned. The children born in the Bastion grew up hearing those stories. To them, the stars were not beautiful. They were scars. They trained not for glory, but for survival. One night, Admiral Kane stood alone at the viewing deck. The artificial sun of the Bastion glowed faintly behind him. He watched the galaxy map, dozens of systems now under human control. But his face showed no pride, only weariness. Commander Lyra approached him and said, "Sir, the Council is collapsing. Their leaders can't agree on what to do." Kane nodded slowly. "Good. But this isn't over. They'll fight harder now. Desperation makes them dangerous." She hesitated and asked, "And us, sir? What are we becoming?" Kane didn't answer. He just looked at the stars and whispered, something they should have never created. As weeks passed, the War of Shadows spread even deeper. The Council worlds began to turn on each other, accusing one another of helping the humans. Entire planets fell into chaos without a single human shot fired. The fear of humanity was now more powerful than humanity itself. And yet, somewhere in that darkness, a quiet hope remained. The humans were not driven by hate anymore, but by a dream of a future where they could live free again. But before that day could come, the galaxy would have to face the full truth of what it had done. And humanity was ready to make them remember. The War of Shadows had only one rule. The humans always struck last, and when they did, nothing survived. The galaxy was falling apart, trade routes were empty, fleets refused to leave orbit, and the name human was whispered like a curse. The Galactic Council was losing power with every passing day. Their grand halls, once filled with light, now echoed with fear and anger. Everyone wanted answers, but no one had any. Admiral Varesh stood before the council leaders, his voice shaking. "We are losing everything," he said. "Entire sectors are silent. We can't track the enemy. We can't predict their strikes." The Supreme Chancellor slammed his hand on the table, his wings trembling. "Then we end this," he said. "We find them, and we erase them completely this time," the council voted. And for the first time in galactic history, every race agreed. They would build the largest armada ever assembled, over 10,000 ships from across the stars. Their mission was simple: destroy humanity once and for all. The fleet gathered in the Zerath system. Near the edge of known space, massive battleships filled the void, their lights forming a sea of fire across the darkness. Every gun, every missile, every weapon was pointed toward one destination: the Bastion. The Council had finally found what they believed was the human stronghold. They thought they had cornered the ghosts, but they were walking straight into a trap. Inside the Bastion, Admiral Kane watched the enemy fleet appear on the radar. The numbers were beyond anything humanity had ever faced. Commander Lyra looked at the screen, her voice quiet but steady. "They're all here, sir," she said. "Every one of them," Kane nodded. "Good. It saves us the trouble of hunting them later." He turned to his crew and said, "Initiate protocol eclipse." Deep beneath the Bastion, giant engines roared to life. It wasn't a weapon, and it was something far more dangerous. The Bastion had been built not only as a fortress, but as a weaponized star for years. Humanity had worked in silence to create a trap powerful enough to change the galaxy forever. As the alien armada advanced, Kane gave a single order. "Open the field!" The human fleet scattered. Pretending to retreat, the council commanders laughed, believing victory was near. But then, space itself began to tremble. Energy waves rippled through the void as the Bastion's core came alive. It started as a faint glow, then turned into a blinding light. The Council fleet tried to flee, but it was too late. The Bastion released its power, a gravitational pulse so strong it collapsed the nearby star into a black hole. The gravity tore ships apart like paper, pulling thousands of vessels into the endless dark. The once mighty armada was gone in minutes. On the Bastion's bridge, silence filled the air. The humans watched as the galaxy's greatest fleet disappeared. No one cheered, no one spoke. Kane stood with his hands behind his back and said quietly, "They wanted extinction, now they understand it." Across the galaxy, the news spread faster than light. Entire civilizations froze in terror. The Galactic Council lost half its members in a single night. Worlds that once mocked humanity now begged for peace. The Chancellor, shaken and pale, appeared on the galactic broadcast. His voice trembled as he said, "We underestimated them. We made a mistake, but humanity didn't reply." Their silence spoke louder than any threat. For the first time in history, the galaxy bowed in fear before a species once considered weak. In every corner of space, one truth became clear. Humanity had turned the tide. They were no longer the hunted, they were the storm that no one could stop. As the fires of war burned out, the Bastion drifted quietly in the shadow of the black hole it had created. Kane stood alone, looking at the stars that had once betrayed his people. He whispered softly, "We don't fight for hate. We fight so no one forgets who we are." And in that silence, the universe finally began to remember. The turning point had come, and from that day forward, the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The war was over, but the galaxy would never be the same again. The Council's fleets were gone, their power broken, their pride shattered. For the first time in centuries, silence ruled the stars. Planets that once stood with arrogance now looked to the void with fear. And in that silence, one name echoed across the galaxies: humanity. The survivors of the Council met in secret chambers. Their worlds were in ruins, their alliances destroyed. They had no strength left to fight. Even the Supreme Chancellor, once proud and untouchable, now spoke with trembling words. "We wanted to erase them," he said, "but we only made them stronger." No one argued, no one dared. The galaxy had learned a truth it could never forget. The humans were not the weakest species. They were the most dangerous when pushed too far. Meanwhile, far beyond the Council's reach, the Bastion floated silently in the shadow of the black hole it had created. Its surface glowed faintly with the light of new cities. For the first time in decades, the humans were not hiding, they were rebuilding. Slowly, quietly, but with pride, children played under artificial skies. Soldiers walked through metal streets, and farmers grew crops in domes made of glass and steel. Humanity was alive again. Admiral Kane stood at the command deck, watching the stars in front of him. His reflection shimmered against the glass. Old and tired, but filled with peace. Commander Lyra approached him with a soft smile. "It's over, sir," she said. "The Council has surrendered." Kane nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the stars. "Over," he repeated quietly. "No, Lyra. This is just a new beginning." In the days that followed, something no one expected happened. The remnants of the Galactic Council sent a message to the Bastion. They didn't demand, they didn't threaten, they asked to meet. The message was simple: "We seek peace." Kane read it in silence, then finally agreed. A week later, a small delegation of alien leaders arrived. Their ships landing in the open hangar of the Bastion, they were escorted to the Great Hall, where humanity's flag stood high above the steel floor. At the center stood Ambassador Hayes, older now, but still carrying the same fire in his eyes. It was him who had once stood in the council hall and refused to bow. Now, the same alien chancellor who had ordered humanity's destruction stood before him. The alien's wings drooped low, his voice quiet and heavy. "We should have never made you our enemy," he said. Hayes nodded slowly. "Maybe," he said. "But sometimes the universe needs to remember what happens when you try to erase hope." The chancellor lowered his head. "We wish to rebuild together," he said softly. Hayes looked at him for a long moment, then replied, "Then start with truth. Tell every world what you did, and tell them why humanity still stands." The alien agreed, his eyes wet with something that looked like regret. And in that moment, something rare happened, the beginning of peace. Years later, the galaxy changed. The Bastion became a symbol of unity, a place where all species could speak as equals. The humans didn't rule. They guided, they didn't conquer, they taught. And wherever a world looked to the stars in fear, a human ship would arrive. Not as a weapon, but as a protector. Admiral Kane passed away under the light of the Bastion's artificial sun. His last words were simple: "Never forget who we were, and never become what they were." His name was carved into the heart of the Bastion. Beside the words, we remember. And so, humanity's story became legend from a species nearly erased. They became the keepers of balance. The galaxy would speak their name with both awe and respect. Because when humanity refused to bow, destiny itself changed, and the stars would forever remember their light.